Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Life and Mastery, and I'm excited to have Derek Sivers, who's the author of philosophy and entrepreneurship, known for his books and his writing style. And he's been author of multiple books like How to Live, Useful, Not True. And he's a former musician, programmer, TED speaker, and circus clown who sold his first company, CDBaby, for $22 million. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Thanks, Rohit. Nice to finally meet you. We've been emailing for 8 years, but this is our first time finally talking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking our time. I've been a big fan of your work, and your book How to Live, and I've read it multiple times. There's so much of knowledge in your books and your writing, and people often ask me, why do I read so many books and where do I get the time? But I've actually bookmarked your website on books, and I look at which are the top books that you're reading and how do you rate it. So I look at all those books which you've rated, and I like to read it. But yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Nice. Yeah, that book list was something I was doing privately for myself because I think at the age of 36, I realized there were many books I read in the past that I know I read them, but looking at the cover, I can't remember what was in it. And that's a
Yeah,
sad feeling. If you've spent 8 or 10 hours reading a book, to not remember it, then it feels like wasted time. So I thought, I wish I would have done this earlier,
yeah,
but I'm going to starting now. Anytime I read a nonfiction book that I want to learn from, if it's a paper book, I keep a pen in my hand and I underline the most interesting ideas, meaning I'm not trying to summarize the book, but the things that make me go, ooh, that's interesting. I want to think about that some more. I'll underline them. And then when I'm done with the book, I type them all into a text file. So now it becomes just a short collection of the most interesting ideas I found in that book. Interesting to me. I'm not trying to do this for others. This is only for me.
nice.
So that then I can go back and review those notes and remember what I've learned or put aside time to reflect on it. So say if a book proposes a very interesting idea, you can take it in the moment you're reading, but I wanted to stop and reflect on that some more and think how I could apply it to my life. So I started doing this in 2007 just for myself. And after about 2 years, I thought, these are just text files. I could put them on my website.
Mm.
So I was a little worried that publishers or authors might tell me to take them down, but they didn't. And in fact, a lot of publishers seem very happy with
Mm.
me talking about the book and linking to it. So yeah, if you go to my website, sive.rs/book, you'll
Yeah.
see, I think it's almost 400, over 400 books there now with all of my notes.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And what's your note making process? Do you like to read on Kindle or do you like to buy physical books and then create notes on it?
These days, so when I first started doing this, I would do paper books with a pen in my hand
Mm.
because it was 2007. But after a few years, I was traveling a lot. Actually, the very first time I went to India in 2008, I brought a bag this big, like, the maximum carry-on size, and it was about 1/3 clothes and 2/3 books.
Wow.
And I think I brought a stack of 12 books with me to read while I was there. And I thought, okay, this is getting to be too difficult. So I was reluctant of the idea of a Kindle
Yeah,
because
okay.
I'm no fan of Amazon. But I got a Kindle and I'll admit it, it's made traveling a lot easier. So yes, these days I use Kindle and there's a feature inside the Kindle called Highlight, where if you hold
Yeah,
your finger down over a sentence, those are saved into a separate text file called myclippings.txt. Then you connect your Kindle with USB. You can copy that TXT file to your computer, parse it with any programming language, and extract all the notes you've taken. So that's what I do. But then I edit them. Almost never take them verbatim. I edit them in a way that makes more sense to me.
mm, right. And do you like to reread those books or is it?
No, see, sorry, that's the whole point is I don't ever want to have to reread a book for 10 hours,
Yeah,
uh, especially if I'm just using it for learning. It's not like I'm reading it just for joy and pleasure. There might
yeah,
be some books that you would just read for pleasure and enjoy reading them again. I've done that twice. There are two books that I've enjoyed rereading for pleasure. but mostly I just want the information in it. So now the big idea is now that I've got this text file of my favorite ideas from this book, I will never need to read that book again. I can just go back to my text file and remember what that book contained. Or what I love is once they're in text files, I've got over 400 of these text files now. I can
Yeah.
search, I can go into that folder and just search for something like commitment or persistence or I don't know, profit.
Yeah.
And find every mention of that word in every book I've read
Mm,
instantly. It's really wonderful.
interesting. And you had recently gone to Shanghai in China, and I left Delhi a couple of years back, and one thing common about Delhi and Shanghai was the air pollution was really bad. But you recently gone there and you said that the air quality was really good. Um, and you also mentioned about the architecture and the places over there. What is it that when you get to travel, what is it that you look at, and what is it that you enjoy seeing, which you could learn from that city and that culture?
I travel to inhabit philosophies.
Mm,
And what I mean is there's a Chinese way of thinking currently. I mean, maybe it changes through time, but right now, China is very, very um, intertwined with the government.
yeah.
So to live in China, I read a few books before I got there explaining that in the Chinese mindset, the government takes care of everything, cradle to grave, as they say. Even if you live in a small town and you have a problem with your landlord, it's the government's problem. You turn to your local government official to sort out the problem with your landlord. If you're sick, it's the government's uh, problem to get you better. The government, it's 10% of China's population works for the government. Sorry,
Oh,
10% of the adult population works for the government. It's the world's largest government, um, just micromanaging every aspect of life. And so I wanted to go there to experience that way of being, you
mm,
know? And if I were to live there or spend more time there even, I would go there to want to do it their way. I wouldn't go there feeling that I'm right and you're wrong. I would go there assuming that they are right and kind of surrendering to that way of doing things. Same thing if I go to a Islamic country in the Middle
yeah.
East, um, I would want to surrender to that way of doing things. I would not want to go in there drinking alcohol and I don't know, wearing a tank top and shorts or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd want to inhabit that philosophy and that way of being in order to experience it firsthand instead of just reading about it in a
Mm,
book.
mm,
Um, I'm specifically not mentioning India yet because I don't really believe that there is an Indian way. You know,
yeah.
I believe it's just an accident of history that what we call India is one country. I
Okay.
think it could have just as easily have been 20 countries, and
Mm,
Europe could have been one country, you
yeah.
know. So I think there are very, very different ways of being in India. So with India, I kind of think of it almost the way that I think of Europe. Like I'd like to go spend more time in different parts.
Yeah.
And yeah, but anyway, in short, that's the reason I travel. I finally figured out after years how to put it into words that I want to inhabit philosophies.
Got it. Interesting. And for the first 40 years, you started off with music and then you built CDBaby. Was it a conscious decision to be a musician because you gave a timeline that you would want to be successful by a certain age, and then did you want to pivot to becoming an entrepreneur?
No, no, no. I thought I was just going to do music for life.
Oh, okay.
Um, no, that's all I wanted. You know, from the age of 14, I said, this is it. My whole life, I'm going to be a successful musician.
Mm,
Um, didn't necessarily need to be famous. I just wanted to be successful, which to me just means my definition of success is just setting out what you achieve.
mm,
Sorry, achieving what you set out to do.
mm,
If you do what you set out to do, then you are a success by your own.
Mm.
definition. A project is a success if it meets its goals.
Right.
Um, it's not about money or fame, but I just wanted to be a successful musician. I wanted to be a great musician. I wanted to make a living doing it.
Yeah.
And I got most of the way there. I got part way there. I bought a house with the money I made from music,
Nice.
but then right away I accidentally started CDBaby.
Mm.
But I never intended to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I never really considered myself an entrepreneur very much. Other people called me that, but I was just helping musicians. I was a musician helping other musicians in a way that to me felt very much like a cooperative, you
Right.
know? Uh, yeah, I wasn't necessarily trying to be an entrepreneur. But then after I sold that company, people looked at me as an entrepreneur and called me an entrepreneur. But when I started to meet a lot of other people that called themselves entrepreneurs, I didn't like them so much. I I found that it all felt stupid to me without music, like the whole time I was just trying to help
Mm.
musicians. I wasn't trying to make money or have social status within certain circles for having a bunch of money and influence.
Mm.
And when people would talk about investors and Q3 results, you know, I I would lose interest completely. To me, without music, it was meaningless.
Mm. Interesting. What I've seen is Americans are very entrepreneurial. Maybe they if you look at some of the most innovative companies, be it Apple and Google, they've all come out of the US. Yeah, and when you sold CD Baby, I've seen entrepreneurs have that, or you don't call yourself an entrepreneur, but when you build something and you sell it, you have that itch to keep building and doing it bigger or more. You want more in life, or that's what you've been trained to think, that let's go for the bigger outcome. So when you sold off CD Baby, did you want to build something, or did you want to go back and do what you want to do, which is build music or write books?
I thought I wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
I think, okay, on the positive side of being an entrepreneur, I think it can be like a playground for grown-ups that uh let's say like a sandbox, that when you have your own company, it's like a sandbox where you can test ideas. I liked the fact that I could read a business book that would say something about a new way to communicate with your customers, or consider trying having three different price points. And I'd go, ooh, that sounds fun. I'd like to try that. And then the next day I would try it. I would just go into my website because it was me. I didn't have investors. I didn't have a board of directors. It was me.
Yeah.
And I liked that it was like my little sandbox where I could go, that's a fun idea. Let's try it. Type
Yeah.
some stuff out, hit send, upload, done. And now my website has three price points. Let's
Yeah.
see what happens. Oh, interesting. People seem to like this. They keep going for the top tier. I wonder if I should have raised my prices. It can be applied psychology or applied philosophy. It it can be a fun place to test your ideas and see how the real world reacts to them.
Mm.
I like that about it. So I found that when I sold my company, I missed that right away.
Mm.
Even just a month after selling the company, I was reading a book by Charlie Munger, who
Yeah.
was Warren Buffett's partner. And he mentioned an idea that I wanted to try. And I went, ooh, I could. I went, now I've got no business. I've got nowhere I can try this idea. And I
Mm.
found that I missed that. It's like a laboratory, a sandbox. Uh, so I can see why people keep doing it. The idea of more and more, that might just be a human nature
Mm.
that we like the feeling of progress. That's why people play video games.
Right.
The dopamine of constant little improvements and this feeling of progress feels really good to us. So somebody might just be sitting in their living room getting more and more unhealthy and fat because they're just sitting there all the time, but they feel like they're making progress because of the video game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess having a business and making more money could be a more healthy version of that. But that's what I thought I wanted. And when I started going further down that path, I realized I didn't actually want that.
Mm,
So for my own human nature, sorry, yeah, just my own personal preference, I should say, I find that I do nothing for money anymore. The money I sold CDBaby for was enough.
yeah.
And everything I do now is just because I find it intellectually interesting, but
Mm,
nothing for the money. So when there's one guy I know in Switzerland who he's a nice guy, but he keeps coming to me every year going, "Oh, Derek, I've got this great opportunity it's going to make money. You know, a friend of mine is starting a new cryptocurrency company, and if you get in now, I think no, 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 like you've missed the point. Like, come on, you know me. I don't want more money." He's like,
yeah.
but I'm sure this thing's going to explode. I'm like, great, tell everybody else, but I don't need more money. That doesn't interest me.
Mm,
Um, Intellectual challenge interests me. Learning Chinese interests me. Meeting people from Africa interests me. Reading new books interests me. Making new money? No, no
mm,
interest at all.
mm. Interesting. And especially after your exit, what is your relationship with money? Once you have had enough, does your relationship with money change, or does it change after a certain age or experience?
It's different for everybody, of course. I read Richard Branson's autobiography where after he has $1 billion, he wants more, but it's not for the money. I think he just sees it as like a fun game that he likes playing.
Yeah.
Um, some of my friends are almost that rich. I know friends that are worth hundreds of millions now, just since I've known them. And some of them keep pursuing profit, even though they've got hundreds of millions of dollars that they'll never be able to spend. They just find it fun to keep
Mm,
pursuing profit. Uh, just as maybe like a challenge. Like, let's see
mm,
if I can make this happen. Um, for me personally, I feel like um, the metaphor I make is as if I had 1,000 cupcakes in my house. It's more cupcakes than I'm ever going to be able to eat in a lifetime. In
mm,
fact, I give cupcakes to every friend that comes over. Like, please take some of my cupcakes. Please let me pay for dinner. Please, look, this is more money than I'm going to spend in a lifetime. And so if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Rohit, I've got a way
yeah.
you can make more cupcakes." You're like, "No, no, 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 no. I do not want more cupcakes. I have enough." So
Yeah.
that's my relation to money.
Mm. Interesting. And I was reading your book, and you had mentioned about writing notes to each customer who bought from CDBaby. And I've been into sales, business development, and partnerships. I've done those sort of things where I would send over bottle of champagne or something to maybe get a meeting, or trying to make a customer feel special. But how are you able to? How can somebody who's working um, in a customer facing role, or maybe in or startup? Because I've spent my entire career in startups. How can you delight a customer so that they feel special, and it's not a like a price war later on? But what can customer
Ooh.
facing guys do to delight the customers?
Hmm. It's different for everybody, different for every business. I mean, like, it depends if your customers are, the purchasing department at Procter and Gamble
Yeah.
versus, you know, uh, Tracy who is buying a sweater for her poodle.
Mm,
Um, but I'd say the common theme is to show people that you see them as a person,
yeah.
meaning more and more everything is automated
Yeah.
and you contact even a company that you've been doing business with for 20 years and sometimes you get this response that's like, "We have created ticket number 43625. please wait 72 hours for a response, or, um, hello, I am customer service representative
Mhm.
9312, and uh, the response to your question is, yes, just click this page and fill out that link. And you
Yeah.
think, oh, come on, I want to be acknowledged as a person that has given you so much money. And I'm choosing you. There are so many other companies I could go with, but I chose to stick with you. I'm not shopping to switch to the lowest price. I'm sticking with you. I'd like a little acknowledgement from somebody that cares.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, whether it's even a person inside the purchasing department at a big company or somebody buying a sweater for their poodle, both people want to be acknowledged as a human, even if it doesn't take that much effort to send the tiniest little email. Looking at the right-hand side of your screen, seeing that this customer has been there many times, but they haven't ordered from you in a year, and it can just be as quick as sending a tiny one-sentence thing that says, "Hey, it's been a year. How are you?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming back. Everything all right?
Yeah.
It's good to see you again." And people go, "Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, a real person. Wow, thank you. Rohit, it's so nice to know that you are a real person is there." That's it. Sorry, that's what took me too long to say. People want to know that they are communicating with a real person,
Yeah.
and that real person acknowledges that you are a real person.
Mm. Mm. Right. And you have built a lot of websites, music companies, apps, and books. And before the call I talked about that, how you put up an ad for a content writer, and
Yeah.
you have personally emailed 3,000 people, and you don't use an um, executive assistant, and you don't use AI to write. How do you manage? And you also single task, which is very very interesting, where you just focus on one task. But how do you manage to do so many different things and do it excellent, in an excellent way?
Well, thank you. It helps that I know a little bit of programming.
Mm,
So most emails take me under 10 seconds to answer
yeah.
because I've mapped my 36 most commonly used sentences. I've mapped them to the 26 letters and 10 numbers on the keyboard. So I hit the backslash key, and
Oh.
I've made these macros. So if somebody emails, I can send boop I, which is like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for taking the time to write that introduction." Um, slash Y, "Hey, I haven't heard from you in years. Everything okay? How have you been?" Somebody says, "How are you?" Slash N, I can say, "Oh, how am I doing? Thanks for asking. Here's this way." So I've just noticed that over how many years? 15 years of answering over 250,000 emails by hand. Yeah, there were many sentences that I was typing very often. So I mapped them to keys. So now I can scan an email quickly, pachoo, 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 pachoo,
Wow.
pachoo, hit 6 keys, send. And
Right.
so I'm able to go through emails in about 10 seconds each. So
Mm,
yeah, 100 emails. Um, what is that? 1,000 seconds? How many minutes? Sorry, I should have picked an easier number to round. Um, but I'm able to go through emails very, very quickly. But yet I am still giving them my personal attention. So it's both. Um, And then, of course, I get emails of somebody saying, "I'm depressed. My wife just died. I don't know what's the meaning of life. What should I
yeah.
do? I'm thinking of moving to Germany, and starting an ostrich farm. Help." And so,
Mm,
of course, there's no form letter for that, and I'll take
yeah.
a little longer to answer those. But then there are plenty of emails that are just people that said, "Hey, I read your book and loved it and want to be on your mailing list."
Mm,
And I'll say, "Cool." Right before you and I hit record, you told me you're from Chandigarh, which is to me, one of the most interesting places in the world that I'm looking forward to going. And
so
if
nice.
if you would have emailed me from the out of the blue, even if you would have just said, "Hi, I read your book and liked it. My name's Rohit. I live in Chandigarh." I went, "Oh my God, Chandigarh!" I would have just quickly said like, "Hey, cool, thanks, glad you like the book, but how cool you live in Chandigarh, and I'd love to hear any stories of growing up there, and someday I'm going to come there, and I'd love to meet you when I do."
Yeah.
And that took 10 seconds to write that, and people get an email like that and they go, oh my gosh, wow, a real
Mm.
person. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And in your book, you made a very interesting comment that assume you're below average. And and I told my wife that it is such a great sentence because you sometimes assume after you're working for some time that I am above average. And you made a very interesting statistic like most 95% of drivers what they assume they're better than others. Um so so what's the thesis like, uh should you always assume that obviously when you're starting out, you know uh with a new profession or a new experience, you're below average, but how do you look at uh, what you mentioned that you assume you're always below average? Are you always looking to keep learning?
yes, but the bigger issue here, sorry, this is what my next book is about, called Useful Not True.
Mm,
It's about choosing beliefs for the effect that they create in you.
mm,
So if you had a tendency to think very low of yourself and to think, I'm awful, I'm terrible, then you would be well served to deliberately adopt a belief that you are great, that in fact, you might be the best in the world at what you're doing. And adopting that belief would help counterbalance your built-in belief that you are terrible and you're awful at everything.
yeah,
Then I would suggest that you should deliberately believe that you're amazing. And then the truth would be somewhere in the middle. So, the beliefs would help bring you to a more accurate uh, connection with reality. In my case, I read this statistic twice in two different books about cognitive biases
mm,
that most people believe that they are much better than average at
yeah,
simple things, at driving, at being a good friend. 95% of patients in hospitals believe that they are better than average health.
mm,
Um, but also 90 something percent of doctors believe that they are better than average doctors. And so after reading this, I thought, I'm going to just choose to believe that I'm below average. I'm going to deliberately try to believe that in everything I do. Even if I'm out driving on the road, I try to think, I'm a pretty bad driver.
yeah,
And believing that maybe then makes me a better driver, maybe helps me be more cautious. Uh, I definitely believe that I am way below average when it comes to business and entrepreneurship. I got really, and this isn't, I don't think I'm feigning this belief. I got really lucky being in the right place at the right time with my one company, but I mismanaged it really badly. I'd say the reason I sold the company is because I did such a bad job at it that I had to sell. Um, I'm a really bad entrepreneur, and it helps me to realize that. I think it makes me more humble, makes me more willing to learn and to listen from everyone. And but anyway, the bigger issue is you should understand where you have a nature to fall and then deliberately choose beliefs that would help counteract your nature to bring it to where you want to be. Bring
mm,
beliefs that will affect your actions in a way
yeah.
that's what you want.
And do you have like feedback loops like, uh, obviously, I would love to have a coach who can direct me, especially in what has happened in the last 2 years, especially when it comes to tech companies. A lot of people have got laid off, and people are scared of AI that they'll lose their jobs and all that. But uh, how can somebody have that feedback loop to ensure that they're getting better at their work, or maybe they're learning or relearning themselves, learning about new skills? What advice would you give to listeners who would want to have that feedback loop to always keep learning?
Sure. Two ideas. Um, a coach and a measurement.
Mm,
Uh, I'll do the coach one quickly because it's not for everybody, but I just want to say A coach doesn't have to be great. It can be almost anybody that's not you. They
Mm,
don't have to be a business genius. Just anybody that's calling themselves a coach can be helpful because it's just somebody outside of yourself, that's outside of your mind, that can look at what your actual actions are. And so if you say, I'm going to lose weight, I'll just pick an easy, thing like that. I'm going to lose weight. Instead, instead of seeing your intentions and good, your good intentions, they're just looking at what you actually weigh and what you're actually eating or how much exercise you're actually getting. They'll demand to see something outside of you. So, number one, I want to say, just go on. If you're thinking that you need some help, just go online and search coach, business coach, life coach, whatever,
yeah.
and go try a few of them. Like hire 3 different people for 2 or 3 sessions each, and then stick with your favorite. It is so, 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 so helpful to have somebody outside of yourself giving you feedback, even if that person is not a genius or a success in their own, they can be really helpful. So I've done that many times with great results to just hire an outside coach to help not just hold me to, it's not about accountability, to help give me an outside perspective on what I'm trying to achieve,
Mm,
uh, and then help observe it from the outside. Okay, so that's number one. But number two came from the first time I hired a coach. I said, I want to get better. In fact, I want to get great at the Ruby programming language.
mm,
And he said, okay, great. How will you know when you're great? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, how are you going to measure it? You want to get great? What's an objective measure that we can use to say that you're great? I went, oh, I said, okay, well, here are the top 6 books on the Ruby programming language. Um, I guess I would consider myself great if I went through all 6 of those books and did all of the exercises and understood them. He said, okay, great. How many chapters are in them? I said, what? He said, the total number of chapters in those 6 books. I said, oh, I don't know. It's different for all of them. He said, well, just go take 2 minutes, go count them. I said, really? He said, yeah, right now. Just take a minute. So I said, okay, hold on. And just while he sat on the phone with me, book number 1 had 19 chapters, book number 2 had 38 chapters, whatever it was. He added them all up together and said, okay, what is your time frame? How long do you want it to take to be great at this? I said, 4 months. He said, okay. You told me that there are a total of 125 chapters. You've got 4 months. That means there's going to be 31 chapters per month for the next 4 months. 31 chapters per month. That's a chapter a day. Can you do a chapter a day? It's 7 days a week. I said, yes, I can. He said, okay, you promise 1 chapter a day and you're going to do it thoroughly. I said, okay, yes. He said, now, do you want to go through each book sequentially, or do you want to do chapter 1 from each of the 6 books and then chapter 2 from each of the 6 books? And he just worked with me to make what was a vague intention
mm,
turn it into a concrete, measurable thing. So I
mm.
think that's the answer to your question about how we can. Well, yeah, that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting, because uh, the follow up to that is, can you measure relationships? Like, uh, yeah, you could measure how many dates you've been to, but can you really measure, friendships or relationship with your spouse, with your family?
That's a fun question. I'm tempted to say the short answer, yes. I don't know what your measure would be, but I'll bet if you spent some quiet time and looked into your heart, you would you would have your own definition of what makes a relationship great. That if we're a great relationship, then we would do this. Okay, how often? Once a week, once a month, once every twice. Okay. And we would have these level of conversations where I feel this kind of feeling afterwards. Okay, how do you get that feeling? Can you think of an example when you did have that feeling? And you just start to, let's just say you put aside the time to define exactly what it is you want.
Mm, right. And you wrote somewhere that the coolest people, um, are the ones who find me through my writing, and yeah, I'm trying to put in the reps to become a better writer. But how can I be more effective in your writing? I think you are very effective in your writing, and you can make people think, but you can make people act through your writing because it's so specific. But how can I or anyone else be very effective in writing? And what's your advice on that?
Thank you. Again, I think it depends on what kind of writing and what your goals are. But
Mm,
say if you were writing fiction, you might want people to fall in love with your main character. So that would be your measure of how good your fiction was, or how many people hate your villain.
mm,
If you're doing sales writing, of course, you would measure it by how many people bought what you're selling based on
yeah,
your writing. It could be that's probably the easiest measure.
yeah,
It's something we're already measuring in numbers. Um, Purchases, new signups. I think that's part of the fun and allure of sales copywriting and
yeah,
marketing writing, is that you see these concrete results. It's almost like the gamification of
yeah.
writing. Um, or is the kind of writing I'm doing for my philosophical nonfiction writing? Honestly, for me, I'm just trying to please myself.
Hmm.
When I wrote that book called How to Live, it took me 4 years of working on that every day until I was happy with it. And I was so happy with it that I didn't really care. Even if I put it out into the world and nobody liked it, I'd say, I don't care. This
Mm,
is the most beautiful book ever. I love this book so much. It's exactly what I wanted it to be. If you all hate it, I don't care.
yeah,
Uh, and that's how I really feel about that book. But there are other ones where I was writing it more for the public.
mm,
And maybe the measure of success for that kind of writing is people getting back to me saying they loved the book, or they made this change in their life thanks to the book.
mm,
Uh, but of course, see, so you heard there's three very different, and that was only three. I'm sure there are other kinds of writing too.
mm,
But you've got to ask yourself the same question you just asked about relationships.
yeah,
Um, how would you measure it? How would you define that this was a success or not? And just put aside the time to reflect and write that down, and then be able to look at your actions saying, okay, am I getting these results? It
mm,
can really simplify things so much. It can take a vague idea like, I want to be a better writer,
yeah,
and turn it into, I want to write something that at least two people a week reply to me
yeah,
saying thank you, or that they shared it. There's another good one. I think Seth Godin would measure himself by how much people shared his writing with others. He would look
mm,
at how many people retweeted it or how many people forwarded it, and that
mm,
was his measure.
mm. And I've seen that you've done short form writing, where your blog post would be, as short as like what Seth Godin, or some of the other project writers would do. And you also done long form writing. Is there any form of writing which you enjoy more?
Well, personally, I like short.
Mm,
My new book, the average chapter length is 20 sentences,
mm,
and that makes me happy. It's the antidote to too many books that blather on for too long, saying what could be said in a short article. They take a whole book to say it. And so I want to do the opposite and say it in a very short book, what
mm,
could have been talked about for much longer. Okay, here's my another little measure of for myself, that how I measure success as a writer. If people wish I would have said more, then
mm,
I've said just the right amount. I
uh,
always want people to wish that I would have said more about that.
mm. Interesting.
But
And
that's just me. That's doesn't mean all writers should be like that. That's a way
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
me happy.
Mm. And another blog post which you wrote was hell yeah or no, and it's been referenced across I've seen a lot of product managers talk about it because a lot of product guys are like the CEOs of the company and they get to decide should they take on this project or not? But how do you get to decide? It could be relevant for somebody who's working in startups, or somebody somebody who's busy or in their personal life. What to say yes or no to a project or something?
It's probably the intersection of what's personally exciting you the most.
Mm,
And if you're having to do it with business, then it has to match the business's goals as well. You might personally be more excited about leaving work early to go skiing,
yeah.
but that doesn't match with the business. So that's not only measuring what excites you the most. Uh, hmm. Yeah. If you're in the position where you can decide for yourself what you do, then it is more about whatever excites you the most. Because when people say they hate their job or they are bored in their life right now, it's usually because they're doing things they don't find interesting. It's like a
Yeah.
compass inside of us that points towards excitement, whatever gives you energy or whatever drains your energy.
Mm,
And I think that as long as you steer towards whatever's giving you energy, you're on the right track. It's the problem is when you do these things because somebody has told you it's what you should do, or you've read a book that says this is the way, and you
mm,
start to do it, but you feel this drain of energy and you're going about it, but you don't want to. That's
mm,
the enemy. That's the state to avoid. Whatever's exciting you, even if it might not make the most business sense,
yeah.
um, I think we need to follow that compass. Uh, it might not be the most profitable thing to do,
Mm,
but if it excites you the most, I think it's worth doing. On that note, I built all of the computers at my old company. I had 85 employees,
mm.
and whenever I hired somebody new that needed a new PC, I would go down to the computer store and I'd buy a motherboard and a case and a sound card and a CPU and RAM and a hard drive, and I'd put it together myself
Oh.
and install Linux on it myself. It saved a lot of money off of buying um, ready to go PCs. But most importantly, I enjoyed it. It was something I would stay at work at night after everybody had gone home. And I could have gone home and I could have gone out to a movie or I could have gone home and sat in front of the TV like a lot of people do. But instead, I stayed at work and I built a computer and installed Linux on it. And it made me happy. And years and years later, I was in Singapore and I mentioned this to somebody who joked um, sarcastically. He goes, "Yeah, that's a good use of the CEO's time." I said, "Yeah, it fucking was because I loved it. It made me
Yeah.
so happy. That was my happiness. If I was only doing what is technically the best use of the CEO's time, I would have quit my job years ago because that would
Yeah.
be boring. So instead, I mixed doing what the company needed with doing what I enjoyed most."
Mm. And I understand that you're living in New Zealand, but you were earlier living in Oxford. You've been to India and Singapore, and I read that for the first 40 years you were in the US, but now you moved around places. Was it a conscious decision to move around after every couple of months or couple of years? Uh, but does it also make it difficult to make new friends?
Um, Yes and no. Yes, it was a very conscious decision. I felt that it was important to keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone.
Mm,
Um, right now, I also have to find, I have to live in a place that's best for me and my kid and his mother.
mm,
So it's not just me. If it was just me, I would be much, much more nomadic than I am. But I'm having to find what's best for all three of us. So for me, in my belief system, uh, I believe it's important to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And as soon as someplace feels like home for me, then I want to keep going to somewhere new.
yeah.
Uh, because then I'm expanding my definition of what feels like home.
Yeah.
If I had never left my hometown, then that's the only place on earth that would feel like home. If I keep going, like right now, there are probably 5 places in the world that all, probably more like 7, that really feel like home for me.
Mm,
Like really, really, really to the core. This is home. How cool that there are 7 places on earth that feel like home to me. I love that.
mm,
I would love for there to be 20 places on earth
mm,
that feel like home. And so I plan to keep going and staying in places long enough until it really truly feels like home. And then I keep going and I keep pushing on to another. As for making friends, it depends. There are some places where I really click with the local culture and I make friends there very easily.
mm,
New York City, Los Angeles, Singapore, and Bangalore
mm,
are my 4 most social places.
mm,
Then there are places that I also love, but I don't have friends, I don't have local friends there. So Wellington, New Zealand, where I'm living now, and even Oxford, England,
nice.
and Portland, Oregon are 3 other places that I lived and I love, but just never really clicked with local people there. And that's
Mm,
okay because I use the telephone. My best friends right now are spread around the world. So right before you and I talked, I was talking to one of my best friends in New York City
oh,
and had to hang up the phone to go, "Oh, hey, sorry, I've got this podcast in 5 minutes. I gotta go." And so I was talking to my friend in New York, um, and I woke up to voicemails from my friend in Bangalore and my other friend in London saying, "How are you? What's going on?" And so I don't know. I have friends by the telephone. If it weren't for the telephone, I'd probably be very lonely.
yeah. And I see that you've been in New Zealand, for quite some time. I mean, you moved around, but you again come back to New Zealand. What's so I've never been to New Zealand. It just sounds it's really the farthest corner of the world. But is New Zealand very different from US and some of these Western countries?
No,
What no?
no. I if you want to, okay, you're in London now. If you want to go to New Zealand, just go to Wales. It's the same thing. It's the exact same as Wales. It's really no different. In the US, I tell people it's just the same as Vermont or Montana. Just go to those places. You don't need to come here.
Yeah.
Um, it's, I don't even think it's worth visiting for most people.
Mhm.
It's just very green and pristine, yes,
Yeah.
but it's not that different from finding a green and pristine part of your own country where you already are. You don't have to fly all the way across the world.
Mm.
I chose to do it because I was living in Singapore when my son was born,
Yeah.
and my wife didn't like Singapore. And so she said, I want to get out of here. So I thought, well, if we have to go somewhere else anyway, what's the best place on earth to raise a baby? I thought, well, New Zealand. It would just be a wonderful place to raise a baby in nature. So I did 9 months of paperwork and became a legal resident and now a citizen.
Mm.
And
Nice.
now it is the place on earth that feels the most like home.
Mm.
I really, really love it
Mm.
completely. But as a place to visit, no. The very first time I visited here in 2004, I was living in California. I spent $12,000 to fly. That's even economy. Flying economy to New Zealand and like 2 weeks of hotels and renting a car. Even trying to save money cost $12,000. It's kind of an expensive country. It's
Mm.
just a long way to fly. And I came back to California very disappointed. Um, I always advise people not to fly to New Zealand and come visit.
Mm. And you mentioned that your son was born 12 years 12 years back, and you love spending time with him. It's like you mentioned you spend 19,000 hours, but when usually when men have kids, they would want to work hard, but since you sold off your company, you want to spend more time with the kid, which is the right way to think about it. But did you consciously decide, like, when I'm going to have a kid, I would want to spend more time with him? Or did it just happen, when you had a kid?
Um, Both.
Mm,
When I was a teenager, I was a fan of the Beatles, and I
mm.
read that John Lennon was a bad dad when his first son was born during the height of
Oh wow, I
Beatles
didn't.
popularity. So he had a first son named Julian and didn't give him any attention because he was busy being a Beatle. And so when Yoko Ono got pregnant, uh, he told his agent, okay, quit everything, no to everything. I'm just going to be nothing but a dad for the next 5 years. And he did. So from 75 to 1980, he was a full-time dad. Uh, he did almost no music, almost no gigs. As famous as he was, he just said no to everything. I'm just going to be with my son. And I
Mm.
remember as a teenager hearing that story, thinking, if I ever have a kid someday, that's what I'm going to do. Like
Wow.
when the kid's born, I'm just going to stop everything and just give him my full attention.
Mm.
So, that said, I was not planning on having kids.
Mm.
Uh, and so, yeah, when I was 41 years old and my wife said she was pregnant, I said, no, 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 no. We agreed not to have kids. And she said, oh, mistakes happen. And so once he was born, though, yeah, I was doing some other business things. I was planning on starting a new company. But as
Mm.
soon as I found out she was pregnant, I kind of shut it all down and have been mostly a full-time dad for the last 12 years.
Mm.
Everything else you see me do is just spare time.
Interesting. And you're about to launch your book, Useful Not True. So when you plan to launch this book, and or why are you writing this book now?
Uh, I'm writing it because it's a really interesting idea that kept coming up underneath other things I was talking about, that I would deliberately choose beliefs, not because they're true, but because of the effect they have on my actions. Like we
Mm.
talked earlier with believing that I'm below average.
Yeah.
Um, or everybody knows this feeling that if you need to shut out distractions and finish something by a tight deadline,
Mm.
you tell yourself, this is the most important thing in the world. Nothing else matters as much as this. And you tell yourself that in order to get something done. Now, that's not true. There are other things that matter more than your stupid project.
Yeah.
But you tell yourself that because that's what you need to believe to get this done in time. So I think we can just do that in other aspects of life too. You can choose to believe that if you finish this project, people are going to be very happy. You can choose to believe that giving is more important than receiving. You can choose to believe that money is just a measure of how much you're giving to the world. Um, all of these things are beliefs that we choose, not because they're true. We don't need to argue about whether it's true or not. We choose them uh, because of the effects they have on our actions.
Mm.
So I found that an interesting subject, and I thought maybe I'll write a book about this. It'll be a good way to learn more about the subject. So yes, for the last 2 years, I went and learned a lot more about this subject. I read maybe 5 books on cognitive behavioral therapy, 6 books about pragmatism,
Wow.
6 or 7 books about religion, beliefs. I just went and learned about the subject a lot. And
Mm.
then, of course, like just looked into my own mind and heart and tried to share what I've learned in a very short way that makes people wish it would be longer.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to read this book. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
The Art of Profitability by Adrian Slywatsky.
Yeah, I don't think I've read this book. I'm going to
Good.
read it later.
It's a masterpiece. It's brilliant. Uh, yeah. He
Correct.
tells it in a funny way as a conversation between a master and a student,
Mm.
but it spells out with line drawings a bunch of interesting profit models with examples. So that's my Art of Profitability by Adrian Slywatsky is my favorite business book.
Correct. We'll put that in show notes. And if you could go back in time when you started, writing and your book, how to live. What is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
Oh, hmm. In terms of writing or in life, how do you mean?
In writing, and like the book you wrote, How to Live, uh, or
Hmm.
could be,
I don't,
entrepreneurship.
I wouldn't have done anything differently with that. There are very few things in life that I wish I could go back and change.
Mm.
I actually wish I wouldn't have left Oxford.
Was
I
it?
loved living in Oxford. I moved there at the beginning of 2019, and I intended to stay for 12 years.
Oh.
And then COVID hit,
Mhm.
and we didn't know how long COVID was going to go on, and we were citizens of New Zealand,
Mm.
which was COVID free, 100% COVID free. Whereas in England, everything was locked down. My kid was not allowed to play with other kids, and school was closed, and travel was closed. So we made the family decision to move back to New Zealand so that my kid could have um, fun.
Mm.
But by doing so, I invalidated my UK visa,
Oh.
and I miss it. I miss living in Oxford. That's one of my few regrets in life. But
Was it?
sorry, that has nothing to do with my book. That it's just actions have hidden consequences. So even things that I can look back and say on a shallow level that I maybe would have done them differently, on a deeper level, they might be affecting me in some beneficial way. So there's really almost nothing that I can look back and wish happened differently. I'm
Mm.
very happy with my life. It's not like I'm missing a leg right now because I tried kicking an alligator.
Interesting. And do you have any favorite online tool, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom, ChatGPT?
No, I am completely opposed. I am I am a product of the time where I grew up, maybe, but I got into the internet in 1994, and in 1999, 2000, all of these companies that my friends were depending on all went out of business.
Yeah.
And things like even like MySpace and MP3.com, businesses that around me everybody was depending on. MP3.com was most musicians' entire web presence. Same with MySpace.com. And so many people put so much of their they depended on that infrastructure. And then poof, gone, out of business. Uh and I'm very, very, very wary of any online tools. I see them as like broken walking canes, you
Mm.
know, that like walking canes with a crack. You would not want to lean too much on them. So I really enjoy the learning and growing process of making something myself if I feel like it's something I need.
Mm.
Um, I use ChatGPT a few minutes a month as I'm writing if I need to say something like, what's a word that means this? Um, list 10 other ways to say this phrase. A large language model is good for coming up with things like that. Um, but that's about it. That's how I'll use it for these days.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. And what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about your writing and your books?
Oh, yeah, you know the answer to that. Everything is on my website. I'm not on any social media.
Uh,
Um, sive.rs is my website. Because of the reason we just said, I don't like platforms.
mm.
I don't trust them. I don't enjoy being on them. I don't like the incentives that people have to make noise to get attention,
Mm.
just so they can get some invisible bonus points, more likes or whatever. So I like just keeping everything on my own website. So
Mm.
sive.rs is my
Mm.
site, and everything is there, including the link to email me, like you did 8 years ago, and I'm glad you did.
Yes, absolutely. And that was so kind of you to reply back. It's very rare to find, an entrepreneur with your stature to reply back. They usually have an executive assistant. So absolutely, this was great fun, and I've been meaning to speak to you for so many years, and I loved your
Yeah.
book, How to Live. I'm going to again to read your new book, which is useful, not true, and I learned a lot of stuff from you. So thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Rohit, and really nice to meet you finally.